So I gotta call BS on something that is, without doubt, going to be challenged in the future. In 1967, the United Nations developed the Outer Space Treaty, which established that all of outer space was an international commons, a province of all mankind. So basically, the ownership of extraterrestrial real estate is forbidden. This treaty was initially developed to ensure that weapons of mass destruction would not be placed in orbit. Despite this treaty, which in my view isn't worth the paper it's printed on, some private companies claim to have offered people the opportunity to purchase the likes of lunar deeds, parts of the moon or stars, for example. Ridiculous stuff. Anyone who gives these companies a cent simply proves that there's a sucker born every minute. But that being said, these outer space treaties are equally as laughable. I find it farcical that the United Nations or similar governing bodies believe that they can write up some treaty that governs and regulates what can and cannot be owned by an individual or country across all of outer space. And by the way, the treaty makes no distinction between our solar system, other solar systems, the rest of the galaxy, or the rest of the universe. It makes reference to outer space, the moon, and other celestial bodies, meaning that this treaty could effectively be seen to apply to the entire universe. Yes, it is literally that vaguely worded. It's also immensely arrogant that all of outer space would be considered a province of mankind, as if there's no civilization out there that would challenge that. Earth is less than a tiny speck of dust when compared to the size of our galaxy, and yet, an organization that's existed for just 73 years claims that it can pass judgment on the entire universe that's billions of years old and infinitely vast. But apparently, no matter how far you travel in your future warp-capable Starship Enterprise, every star, planet, moon, asteroid, comet, and black hole you encounter in the farthest reaches of space will all apparently fall under the legal jurisdiction of some local space laws developed on Earth. A single grain of sand on one particular beach considers itself to be the most important one out of all the grains of sand on every beach across the world. That's kind of like what we're talking about here. That's a microcosm of the stupidity you're dealing with. So, obviously, it's daft and naive to claim that you can live your entire life on planet Earth with no hope of ever leaving this planet, and then look up in the sky one day and claim that a star or region of the moon or Mars belongs to you. If you or someone on your behalf can't physically travel there and successfully defend what you claim to be your property on Mars or the moon or a distant asteroid, then it isn't yours, I'm afraid. In civilized societies, governments enforce property contracts on behalf of citizens who purchase properties to guarantee their property rights are protected. The police can protect you from having someone steal your home by force, obviously. That's the beauty of the societies we live in. That way you don't have to sleep with one eye open. But out in space, beyond civilization, where there is no state to guarantee anything, we essentially have the Wild West, and all bets are off. If a powerful enough force plants a flag and then secures a territory, and there's no one with the power to dislodge them, they can make a rightful claim to that region, fair and square. Remember the film Red Planet? There's a scene in which the character Dr. Quinn Birchnell, played by Tom Sizemore, says the following.
I say, Commander Bowman, when we get to Mars, we just take it. We just take it over for ourselves.
Call Earth, tell them it sucks, and don't bother coming?
Yeah, whatever keeps out the riffraff.
Obviously, Birchnell is joking here, and of course, there would be no practical way for a small crew to defend Mars from significant numbers of Earth expeditions from landing on the Red Planet, but colonies almost always inevitably break away from the empire or nation that established them. Some of you may realize where it is I'm going with this. Like it or not, the Outer Space Treaty will be unenforceable in my view, and will probably be ignored. And if a powerful enough nation wished to seize control of the moon, Mars, or some other part of our solar system, if they had the power to get there and then defend it from outside interference and foreign invasion, then it would have to be recognized as belonging to that nation. If America wishes to one day build a base on the moon and call it a province of the United States, who exactly is going to stop them? The international community can kick up a stink all they want. If they cannot challenge America's claim through physical force, their protests are irrelevant. If America can physically and militarily control that area and defend its border, then it wins that region. End of story. To the victor go the spoils. Treaties be damned. If China seizes a considerable area of land on Mars and no other nation has the power and force to dislodge their control, then it belongs to China. Eventually, new treaties will be established to recognize that these colonies belong to those nations. Moreover, eventually those nations will begin selling chunks of their new Martian property to their citizens back on Earth, and this financial investment will make the colonies quite lucrative and help to fund further expeditions to the planet. However, as I've previously stated, colonies inevitably break away, and when it comes to outer space colonies, it will be even more difficult for any central Earth power to retain control of them, given the distances, dangers, and complexities of space travel and human colonization. For example, let's say a number of nations develop settlements on Mars. These colonies would continue to fall under the remote governance of Earth nations. Eventually, after a few generations, cultural and political divergences will emerge. Mars could essentially one day become North America. Initially, colonies will likely be exploited for their economic benefits, for resources, etc. But the colonists are the ones who have to live their day-to-day lives there. Future generations born on Mars will likely feel zero connection to planet Earth and the nations of origin of their ancestors. They may not even be able to return to Earth because the low gravity on Mars would physically make it too difficult to adapt to Earth gravity. They would consider themselves to be human Martians, not human Earthlings or human Terrans. They may even be taller as a result of the gravity and gradually will develop a distinct look all of their own. The people on Mars will eventually resent the taxation and laws of a foreign Earth-based government being imposed upon them. No taxation without representation comes to mind. Isolation from the significant distance from Earth will mean that cultural and societal differences will develop. The way of life on Mars will be very different from Earth. Martians and Terrans will increasingly see each other as distinct and alien. Another reason why colonists on any new frontier tend to eventually resent their governments back home is because the colonists are the ones who have to risk their lives in taming the environment of their new lands. They therefore develop a deep and meaningful connection to that place. They must be the adventurers and pioneers who develop innovative technological solutions to the problems they will face. Government bureaucrats sitting comfortably in parliaments back on Earth will be unable to relate to the hostile challenges the Martian colonists will face. They will be seen as little more than predatory economic vampires, extracting resources and wealth from the hard labor of the Martians who risked their lives to make a home on Mars. Predictably, the Martian colonies will break away in their quest for independence from the imperial nations that established them. Inevitably, many of these uprisings will be violent. The history of empires and their colonies repeating itself once again, but this time across the cosmos. Of course, I understand that many people would be uncomfortable with the idea of looking up into the night sky and seeing the moon or Mars potentially being owned by another Earth nation. But in truth, if a nation makes a claim to a territory in space and can then back that claim up with a military force that cannot be matched, basically demonstrating that it can defend its borders, then like it or not, we'd have to concede that the moon or perhaps Mars belonged to that nation, at least until they eventually fought to secure their own independence one day. Before too long, the central nation state of those new worlds would potentially break down into smaller and smaller sovereign independent countries. However, we have to be honest here. As much as it would be inevitable that colonies would eventually secede from their Earth-based nations of origin, the initial primary incentives for space exploration and human colonization are going to be economic and political. Even if private companies are the ones who first establish bases on the moon, Mars, or elsewhere, Earth governments are going to be the ones who seek to remotely control them, militarily and economically. Right now, nations of the world may agree to sign up to pointless treaties like the UN's Outer Space Treaty, but these kinds of agreements are empty promises. Talk is cheap, and all of these promises to not compete against each other for territory in space are only made now because at present the technology isn't quite there to readily begin the colonization just yet. But once the technological capability is achieved, watch as once again superpowers emerge in a desperate scramble to lay claim to some outer space real estate. Interplanetary wars will become inevitable.
This all sounds like something straight out of the TV series The Expanse.
And to be honest, after recently reading John Glubb's The Fate of Empires, I see this as the only real way forward for humanity to avoid further societal and cultural stagnation and to prevent a decline into an ideological dark age. In truth, Western nations have succumbed to an age of cynicism, nihilism, and decadence that will lead to their downfall. What is needed now is a return to the explosive, pioneering, high energy and optimism that is characteristic of the birth of great nations. Nations and empires remain strong because they aspire to conquer new lands and expand their territories, even if that expansion will one day result in fragmentation and a rise in independence movements for their colonies. This is all part of the natural ebb and flow of the expansion and contraction of human progress. Survival and evolution of any species is defined by adaptation and the overcoming of adversity. Becoming a spacefaring civilization will provide all of the adversity and challenge we could ever ask for, as well as the opportunity to secure the long-term survival of our species. It also can help to galvanize humanity, allowing us to overcome many political differences that currently divide us. Furthermore, the final frontier of space exploration carries with it the enticing promise of escape from increasingly authoritarian globalist regimes on Earth. Now, by no means do I see space exploration as a cure-all for humanity. I should make it clear that economic and material aspirations are insufficient for a civilization to thrive for long. Every great nation and empire that succumbs to decadence does so because it not only begins to navel gaze, but it also sacrifices its values, culture, and spirituality in favor of frivolity, hedonism, and personal financial gain. The success of nations, just like the happiness of individuals, cannot be solely achieved through financial self-interest. People want to be united by more than just the designer labels they wear and brands they invest in. They want to believe in bigger things than just themselves, whether that's a belief in a higher power or in the desire to serve one's nation and one's people. Regardless of a person's religious beliefs or lack thereof, looking outward and beyond the limits of our own home planet would provide even the most cynical with a sense of awe, wonder, and potential spiritual fulfillment in the quest to understand the answers to the greatest and most timeless questions of existence.